Right then, Celtic supporters, gather round because today's story is one of those journeys that feels bigger than football itself, the kind that makes you stop for a moment and realize how far someone can come when all they've got is determination, curiosity, and that stubborn belief that they're meant for something different. When you look at the name on everyone's lips right now, you see a coach whose path never followed the easy road, never leaned on fame from his playing days, never relied on shortcuts. Instead, it's a tale shaped by constant movement, learning from every corner of the world and trusting instincts that most people would second guess. And when you trace that path all the way back, you start to understand why so many folk think he could fit the intensity, expectation, and identity of Celtic Football Club. He grew up bouncing across different countries, and even as a kid, he seemed to soak up every bit of culture he came across. He talks about it openly, how traveling shaped him long before he ever stood on a touchline, how being exposed to all sorts of people gave him a sense of empathy that later became a massive part of how he deals with players. When he finally settled in Toulon at around 11 years old, he already had this worldview that most folk don't get until they're much older. And there in the south of France, he started taking football seriously, joining the academy at Sporting Club Toulon. He wasn't the sort of player who made headlines, but he was smart, reliable, always 2 steps ahead in his reading of the game. A proper thinker rather than a brute. His career took him into the professional ranks, eventually reaching the 2nd division, and that alone tells you he had talent. But it never became a long, glittery career. Around 10 years in, the path seems to fade. He drifted through lower divisions, moved into amateur football, and rather than chasing a few extra years just for the sake of saying he was still a player, he seemed to accept that the real future was elsewhere. What's fascinating is that he admits he'd already been thinking about coaching while still playing. That alone explains a lot about the manager he would eventually become. He wasn't someone clinging to the last scraps of a playing career. He had bigger ideas brewing, even if he didn't yet know how far those ideas would take him. And then came the decision that changed everything. Around the mid-2000s, he packed up his life and moved to Montreal. Not a logical, tidy step, not a typical move in a football career. It was him following that gut feeling he always mentions, chasing a sense of possibility rather than a clear plan. He had family living in North America, a friend who had already moved to Canada, and he felt that same pull he'd felt so many times before when traveling as a kid. So he took a short holiday, breathed in the place, and decided he'd give himself a year. That's all. 1 year to see if the instinct was right. While settling there, he kept playing for a bit, turning out for the University of Quebec at Montreal, and he even ended up being named the most valuable player in the University League. But the spark for playing was already fading, and the spark for coaching was burning brighter than ever. And this is where the story becomes properly inspiring. His first coaching job in Canada wasn't glamorous. He wasn't dropped into a fancy academy or handed a senior role just because he once played professionally. No, he started with an under-14 girls team. Most folk would look at that and think it's a tiny role. But that's the beauty of his story. He didn't treat it like a tiny role. He treated it like the start of a ladder he fully intended to climb. And instead of laughing at where he began, people should admire how far he climbed from that starting point, because reaching the American top flight from there shows a level of work ethic that cannot be faked. From that point on, he became part of the Montreal football fabric. He joined the academy when it officially launched in the early 2011s, moving between age groups, shaping young players everywhere he went, under 8, under 21, under 16. He worked across the whole pathway and built a reputation for being calm, thoughtful, and ridiculously committed. By the time he stepped into a senior assistant role, he'd earned the trust of everyone around him. Years later, when the club needed a new manager in early 2021, he was there, not because he was a big name, not because the fans demanded it, but because the club believed in the work he'd done for over a decade. He finally had his first shot. But here's the thing, his managerial beginning wasn't some fairy tale introduction. He walked into chaos. Pre-season had barely started. Half the squad weren't even there. Friendlies had been scrapped. Players were scattered across different countries. And on top of it all, the pandemic meant they weren't even playing in Montreal. Imagine trying to build a team while stuck hundreds of miles from your own stadium, your own routine, your own normality. That's the madness he stepped into right at the moment he became a first-time manager, and somehow he just adapted, improvising until everything settled. His first season wasn't spectacular, but it showed promise, showed structure, showed enough for Montreal to extend his contract early because the people closest to him recognized how he worked, how the players responded, and how his football made sense even in tough circumstances. By the end of that first season, he'd already achieved something meaningful by winning the National Cup, lifting silverware at his first attempt. By the following year, things properly clicked. Montreal were flying, breaking club records, scoring freely, defending well, and finishing among the top sides in the league. He ended that season nearly being named Coach of the Year, lost by a sliver, a fraction, the sort of margin that still proves he'd entered the conversation among the most impressive managers in the league. And then, just as everything seemed perfect, the story twist arrived. A clash with the club's owner, a proper confrontation behind closed doors, the type of incident that reveals character. Folks talk about him being a yes man, someone who'd just nod along to please the board, but if that was true, he wouldn't have stood his ground. He made it clear that certain lines couldn't be crossed, even if it meant risking everything. That kind of backbone is something supporters at Celtic always appreciate. It speaks to someone who knows what leadership actually means, right? Let's keep this story rolling, because the next chapter in his journey is every bit as revealing as the early years, and it paints an even clearer picture of the kind of figure he could become inside a club like Celtic. After that explosive fallout in Montreal, everything moved quickly, the dressing room backed him, performances surged, and the team put together a run that showed real unity under his leadership. But the damage with the hierarchy was done, and when the season wrapped up, the moment came for him to choose a different path. That's when Columbus Crew stepped forward, not just offering him a job, but actively negotiating a full financial package to bring him and several members of his backroom team with him. That alone tells you his influence wasn't small. His methods weren't just appreciated, they were seen as essential. In Columbus, he walked into a squad that had pieces of quality but lacked the spark and clarity needed to really compete at the top. And immediately you could see his fingerprints all over their football. Everything became more fluid, more controlled, more aggressive in the right moments. His sides don't just pass the ball for the sake of it. They move in patterns that drag opponents around like puppets. And every player seems to understand exactly where the next step should be. It's a style built on intelligence rather than chaos, something that demands bravery, sharpness, and constant movement. And the players bought into it because they could feel the clarity, they could feel the improvement. Within a season, Columbus went from a team with potential to one of the most entertaining sides in North America. What stands out most is how adaptable he is. His teams build from the back, but they're not stubborn about it. If the press becomes too intense, they find another route. If the midfield needs reshaping, he changes it mid-match. He never looks panicked. He never looks like he's lost the thread. Everything feels deliberate, almost like he's playing the entire match, 3 or 4 moments ahead of everyone else, and that calmness filters into the players around him. They trust him because he communicates clearly, but he also challenges them. He wants thinking footballers, not robots, and that's something that could resonate massively at Celtic, where players are expected not only to win, but to express a style that reflects the identity of the club. And while his football was earning praise, his leadership was winning admiration in the dressing room. Players spoke openly about the connection they felt with him, about how he valued the human side of the game as much as the tactical one. He didn't treat his squad like pieces on a board. He treated them like people whose confidence mattered, whose journeys mattered. It's no surprise that some players even demanded transfers when he left Montreal. That kind of loyalty doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's built from respect, honesty, and consistency, the sort of qualities supporters always hope to see in the person standing on the touchline at Celtic Park. But it's not just the man management or the tactics that catch your attention. It's the sense of purpose he carries, almost as if every step of his career has been shaped by those early years of traveling, learning, adapting, living outside his comfort zone. He trusts his gut because it has always led him somewhere meaningful. And now, as he stands on the verge of the biggest opportunity of his career, that instinct is pulling him toward a club with expectation levels unlike anything he's faced before. Yet he doesn't seem fazed by pressure. He embraces it. He sees it as part of the journey rather than something to fear. And if he arrives at Celtic, he'll be stepping into a club that demands control, bravery, and a sense of identity every time the players walk out the tunnel. He'll inherit a squad that has talent, but needs direction, needs structure, needs a clear voice guiding them through a season that doesn't allow breathing room. And although he won't have control over every aspect behind the scenes, he's already shown that he won't sit quietly if something feels wrong. He's not going to be pushed into decisions that go against his principles. He's not someone who bends just to keep the peace. And that's crucial because Celtic aren't looking for someone to drift along. They need someone who steps in with conviction, who sets standards, who demands accountability. There's also the question of his staff, the group he's built over years of working across different levels. They trust his vision, they understand his methods, and if a few of them follow him to Scotland, it could give him a foundation from the first day, a team behind the scenes that already knows how to prepare sessions, analyze opponents, and translate his ideas onto the pitch. Continuity like that is invaluable when a manager takes on a job as intense as Celtic. His football, his temperament, his journey, everything points towards someone who doesn't shrink from challenges but grows through them. And when you look at where Celtic are right now, needing stability, clarity, and strong leadership, it becomes obvious why so many supporters are paying attention to this possibility. He's not a figure built on reputation. He's built on years of honest graft, of climbing each rung with no shortcuts, of turning unconventional paths into stepping stones towards something bigger. And that kind of mentality, that refusal to be boxed in by expectations, might be exactly what Celtic need as the next chapter unfolds. And while some may look at his resume and see a man with fewer headline achievements than other candidates, others will see someone whose entire journey has been defined by perseverance, a coach who climbed every rung, a coach who trusted his instincts, a coach who built credibility not through fame, but through work. And in football, especially at a club like Celtic, that kind of hunger can become a powerful force. His story is far from finished, and whatever comes next will add a new chapter to a career that already feels remarkable. From a global childhood to a decade in youth development, from unexpected setbacks to moments of triumph, from conflict behind the scenes to loyalty from his players, everything he has done so far has prepared him for environments where passion runs high and expectations run higher. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. Whispers are swirling ruined Parkhead this morning, and they're the kind of murmurs Celtic supporters were hoping to hear. Word has it that Dyson Maida, the relentless whirlwind on the left flank, might be edging towards an unexpected departure from the club. Nothing's been stamped, done official, but the chatter creeping through Glasgow's East End has a bite to it, the sort that leaves folk shifting uneasy in their seats. Some inside sources, the type who often ken a thing or two before anyone wants them to, are hinting that the forwards camp has been approached by parties outside Scotland, clubs tempted by his tireless pressing, raw pace and knack for rattling defenders. And while transfer rumours flare up at Celtic Park like midwinter gossip by the fire, this one feels heavier, the kind that hangs in the air longer than usual. Supporters are already muttering that losing Maeda would be a brutal blow, particularly given how central he's become to the system. The lad's work rate has been a staple, the sort of thing managers love and opponents dread. You can replace goals. Replacing a player who runs like he's powered by pure thunder is another matter entirely. Insiders are saying Celtic have no intention of letting him wander off without a fight. But there's a creeping fear that the lure from abroad, the wages, the sunshine, the spotlight, might be tugging at him. Even the players, it's said, have been glancing at one another in training with that unspoken question hanging between them. Whether this storm fizzles out or grows into something far nastier remains to be seen. But for now, the rumour mill is grinding at full tilt, and every whisper suggests the same grim notion. Dyson Maeda leaving Celtic would be a terrible bit of news indeed, one that could shake more than just the terraces. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.